Hello my friends, you are with Downcanshire today. Something a little bit different is going to be happening in this video because I wanted to take some time to talk about some of the products that I can't live without. Now, you will probably know if you watch this channel regularly that I'm not the biggest lover of product-driven thinking when it comes to painting. But I am still human, and like everyone else, I have my favourites and I have my reasons why those things are my favourites. So I figured, in my very limited wisdom, it could be fun to just do a little video where we talk about the things that I like and why I use them. So I suppose the logical place to start is paints, and that's why I've got this nice piece of foam board down in front of me. This is going to give us just a nice visible background on which you can see any paints that I apply to show you what they look like. So we're going to start off with some Vallejo model colour. If you know much about my painting, you'll know that that's the brand that I tend to use the most, and some of the colours that I go to above all else. Probably the big one would be Sunny Skin Tone. This has got to be the paint that I use the most from the entire Vallejo range, and for quite an interesting reason. When you look at it from the outside of the bottle, it looks like it's going to be a really golden yellow, but Vallejo bottles often look more saturated and darker from the outside than what the paint actually does. What this paint really is, and I'll try and keep this in shot, is just a very creamy kind of warm yellow. It has exceptionally good coverage, which is really, really important. But the thing that I love it for the most is that it's like a universal highlighter. It works really, really beautifully for brightening up most colours, and you'll be surprised by some of the colours that it can brighten up. For example, just sidestepping away from Vallejo for a moment, this is my favourite skin base for doing anything sort of Caucasian to medium skin, Chianti Sienna. Because it's got a lot of red in it, and because it's quite dark, you can use it to do a broad range of skin tones and just glaze sort of modulations in over the top. But you look at how this mixes with my lovely Vallejo Sunny Skin Tone. You see we have a very sort of base flesh looking colour, but as soon as we introduce some Sunny Skin Tone into it, we just get a whole lovely range of really nice convincing skin tones. Now I find that to be such a beautifully, elegantly simple skin workup that with just a bit of glazing of blue, green or red over the top of it, this serves me for basically all of my Caucasian to medium skin tones. And I think that's very impressive when just two colours can do that. But where Sunny Skin Tone starts to get a bit magical is when you use it to highlight cold colours. So this is blue-green from Vallejo Model Colour. And again, this is one of my favourites, and it's one of the paints that I use really regularly. So you will see this a lot cropping up in my work. In fact, as an example, I just finished this lovely Tic Balang for Infinity, and you can quite clearly see there's quite a lot of this featured in this. So that gives you an example of how it can look on a miniature. But what's pretty remarkable is when you mix it with some of this Sunny Skin Tone, the range of colours that it produces there. So check this out, I'll pull some out. Again, you can see the colour, it's kind of a tealy sort of blue. We get this nice, slightly desaturated sort of green-blue coming forward from it as we mix increasing amounts of Sunny Skin Tone into it. Really, really beautiful. And again, that range of colours is just so usable for creating nice poppy accent colours, but keeping the tones more natural. With these blue-green kind of colours, we can get very tempted to take them into some really neon places, and a lot of the times that looks amazing. But sometimes these sort of natural sea colours are really, really beautiful too. Which brings me on to my next one. This is another one I use all the damn time, and this is Dark Sea Blue. Love Dark Sea Blue. It is a banger. So Dark Sea Blue has a lot of functions. As you can see, it is very, very dark. And one of the things that you'll quite commonly see it used for is non-metallic metal. And that's because, as you can see, when you mix white into it, it sort of goes grey and then it starts to lighten up. And this means that it can be really, really handy for non-metallic metal. And indeed, I use it myself for that sort of function occasionally. But again, keeping things interesting, you can totally mix it with something like blue-green, and you start to go up through these kind of battleship blues, which is really, really nice if you're doing those kind of, say if you were doing dystopian wars, for example, and you wanted those nice battleship blues, that's a really good two-stage workup. You can also just lighten it with white. It takes white really, really well, and again, stays in that kind of greyish tone. I mean, I don't know why I really mixed that as a separate, because I'd already showed it you with the NMM demonstration, but but there's a lot that you can do with deep sea blue. It's a very usable colour, and in fact, it will even mix up interestingly with sunny skin tone. Again, taking us into some sort of desaturated blue-green areas. Perhaps this could be a really interesting way for Horus Heresy, Sons of Horus. That could be an absolute winner. I apologise that the autofocus is dancing a little bit. I'll see what I can do to fix that. Bear with. And the final model colour that I want to show you, and again, you know, we've all got lots of go-to paints. I could talk about dark Prussian blue. I could talk about flat brown. There's a bunch, but finding a good coverage, easy to work with red can be a real challenge. And so I'm going to talk about vermilion as my final pick for specifically model colour, because it is exactly that. It's a really nice, easy to work with, good coverage. I would call it medium-high coverage. So it's not, you know, it's not going to be like your Mephiston red levels of coverage, but again, it does a lot. It mixes nicely with sunny skin tone, if I can find any that's still clean on the palette. You can highlight it up through sunny skin tone really nicely. You can highlight it up through white because it's got a bit of a pink tone to it. It's sort of a slightly magenta toned red. So you can highlight it up through white without it looking too weird. Again, just a very usable multi-purpose red that works its way into my painting a hell of a lot. Specifically when I'm painting Infinity Morats, to be fair, because obviously they do love a red. So that's probably my favourite Vallejo model colours. As I say, there are definitely more, but these are the ones that I think are important. Honourable mentions go to definitely Cavalry Brown. This is an amazing base for you to paint your reds over. Honourable mentions definitely go to Dark Prussian Blue, which I mentioned previously. Again, this is an amazing base for your blues. A lot of these are bases. There's a combination of, if I can find it, there's a combination of Vallejo Royal Purple and Vallejo Purple, which is again a fantastic two-colour workup for purple. And this is how a lot of my painting is built up, a two-colour workup, and then I introduce sunny skin tone or white as my lighteners to get my highlights. And that's kind of just a foolproof method that works really well for me. Aside from that, there are a few game colours that I want to mention as well. Escorpina Green is a great one. Sun Yellow is a great one. I will show you both of those in just a second. Magic Blue is another fantastic model colour that I use a lot. And then if I can find the final one, that would be Parasite Brown. So these four are probably the game colours that I like the most, the ones that, again, I find myself using the most frequently. There are others, but we'll talk briefly just about these. Don't need to really bore you with too much more paint conversation. Parasite Brown is a really nice medium orange brown in conjunction with Cavalry Brown as a base and any kind of yellow as a top. It makes a really nice sort of orange to yellow workup for Yu Qing. And again, highlights really nicely into sunny skin tone, so that's why I love that. Sun Yellow. Just very rare that you find a full brightness yellow with the coverage of Sun Yellow. Sun Yellow really likes to cover. Like you can see as I paint it over a darker colour here, it is transparent like most yellows are, but it's already severely washed out that underlayer and it will just continue to do so. 3 coats probably to get full coverage from it, maybe 4, which, you know, by standards of like a red or a dark green or a brown is not amazing, but by standards of a yellow, that's a really high coverage full brightness yellow, and that's why I tend to use it. Magic Blue is the colour that I pull out when I just want to do really, really bright blues. This is very similar to the old Games Workshop Enchanted Blue from back in the day. So if I'm trying to get those kind of retro nostalgia GW schemes, I go with this. Again, highlights up really nicely through white without losing too much saturation, because again, I think it's got a bit of magenta in the base, which helps it sort of just hold some oomph as it highlights up through white. And I really do like going after seeking out these paints that highlight up really, really nicely through just one color addition, that don't need sort of complex work to form good highlights. And then the last one that we'll talk about with game color is Escorpina Green, or Scorpion Green. And again, this is based on the old Striking Scorpions green, I believe. It's just a very pretty sort of bright green with just a touch of desaturation. They do a colour called Livery Green as well, which if I hold them side by side, you'll think they're quite similar on paper. But Livery Green is more that sort of full brightness neon green, whereas Escorpina Green just has that little bit of desaturation to it, that little bit of brown or ochre or olive to it. It just makes it a little bit more usable. It kind of has a bit more of a natural look to it. And that sort of sums up some of my can't live without, really, really love, use them all the time kind of paints. Let's move on to some other products. Starting with airbrush accessories. The first thing I'm going to talk about actually is varnishes. I used to absolutely swear by this varnish, and I kind of still do. Swear by this varnish, but there are a couple of problems with it that should be acknowledged. It is an absolute fiend for clogging airbrushes, and it can be really, really hard to get them unstuck without doing a field strip and a full clean down if this clogs them, because it just coats and dries very sticky, and that's a real issue for the insides of your airbrush. That said, it does give a really nice matte finish. It is fantastic, it is beautiful, and I do recommend it. If this is what you can get, use it. It's great. Just take care of your airbrush when you're using it. However, and this is going to surprise a few people, I don't recommend Army Painter products very often. Most Army Painter products I'm not very keen on. The speed paints I'm a bit 50-50 on. I don't typically like those contrast-like products, but the speed paints, even with the reactivation issue considered, are the ones that I've got on best with so far for how I like to paint. But you do need to work around that reactivation issue, which is a bit of a pain in the arse. One Army Painter product that I will always recommend, though, is their matte varnish, their airbrush matte varnish. This is very, very good. It provides a significantly more matte finish than most other airbrush mattes that I've tried, but it also doesn't seem to clog up the airbrush, which is what's important to me. It doesn't cause me to have to do a million years worth of cleaning. As well as that, I recommend this, which is actually several products all at once. This is a squeezy bottle, which you can buy these off Amazon, off Wish, off eBay, off basically anywhere that sells mass-produced, cheap products. They're not expensive, but what I've got inside here is a mixture of a fifth of alcohol, so a fifth of the volume of the bottle, not a fifth as in the American measurement, a fifth of the volume of 90% isopropyl alcohol, then topped up to the line with water, and then just the last little bit has got about 15 or 20 drops of airbrush flow improver. What this does, having this on hand, is basically gives me a universal product that kind of does everything. It's good to use as a thinner for thinning paints. It's good to use as an airbrush thinner. It's good to use as an airbrush cleaning solution because of the alcohol content. It just sort of does a bit of everything. And that's so convenient and so useful. So I really recommend, you'll pay for about 5 or 6 of these, you'll pay about £4 or £5 in the UK. They're very cheap. I really recommend grabbing some of these bottles and just making yourself a little mixture of alcohol, water, and airbrush flow improver to go in your airbrush to thin your paints. It just does so much stuff, and it's really, really cool. Something that often surprises people is when I talk about glues and super glues, because I've got some slightly unorthodox recommendations. Now, cyanoacrylate superglue, it's all the same chemical. Cyanoacrylate is literally the chemical that causes the superglue. It's the polymer that causes the supergluing to happen. The difference from brand to brand of superglues is just what thickeners they put in, any agents that they put in to make them cure faster or slower, things like that. So it's how the glue handles and how fast or slow the glue dries. Now, if you're doing a lot of metal miniatures, you will have at some point become familiar with superglue activator. And generally, using superglue plus activator is what we consider to be best practice for supergluing. So with that in mind, I tend to go for Mitafast. And Mitafast is a great product because it comes bundled with a massive can of activator. So the reason I really, really like this is because it's a big old massive amount of superglue and a big old massive amount of activator in one, and it's about £5. Really affordable. Don't buy big brand, especially hobby brand superglues. Army Painter, Games Workshop, all of them, they're a rip-off. They're going to charge you, you know, £5 or £6 just for that, just for the glue. Here we're getting the whole can of activator that, I mean, you can pay, again, if you go for a hobby brand, you can pay £8 or £9 for one of these. You're getting both together here for about £5 or £6. I'll see if I can find an Amazon link for Mitafast, and I'll put it in the description. And anything else that I can find links for, I'll put in the description. But these two products really are the bee's knees when it comes to super glues. This can be a little bit prone to clogging sometimes, but fortunately, you can just unclog it just by sticking something sharp in there, and it is literally just the tip of it that gets clogged. It's not the whole tube. It'll just get a little film of glue over it. But once you've got it unclogged, it dispenses glue absolutely fine, as you would expect it to. And this stuff cures glue absolutely fine, as you would expect it to. No surprises there. People will often say to me, but how can you recommend a product with such a chunky nozzle like this for doing such fine work as miniature painting? But when I'm working with really fine things that I need to super glue, I'm not working off the nozzle of the glue anyway. I put a little blob onto whatever's at hand, usually a piece of plastic, and I use a cocktail stick to apply it to the miniature, and I dab it on with the tip of a cocktail stick. So the actual applicator that comes with your super glue is kind of irrelevant, and again, don't be fooled into paying a bunch of extra money for super glue with posh applicators on it, because it's not helping you, it's just charging you extra money. We've all got toothpicks in the drawer, or at least most of us have. If you haven't got toothpicks, you've probably got something similar that you can use as an applicator for your super glue. As well as that, when it comes to plastic glues, my views are sometimes a little bit controversial because I quite like these ones with the needle nose on them. Now, Tamiya Thin Cement is a fantastic plastic glue, and I have in the past used it a ton. The issue that I have with Tamiya Thin Cement is just that supply can be a bit difficult. I struggle to find hobby shops in my area that stock it, and even Amazon have very wavering supply of it. It can be very, very hard for me to get hold of. So with that in mind, if you also struggle to get hold of it, then I will show you how to make these products less shit. Because these are, let's face it, a pain in the arse a lot of the time. The needles on these plastic glues constantly clog, but they're also very, very easy to unclog. You just use a cigarette lighter. Hi folks, Editor Shy here. Just a quick note about the section coming up. I actually made a huge mistake in this section that was pointed out to me by one of my early access patron viewers. In what I'm about to demonstrate, as well as the safety warnings that I did give, the product is also very flammable, so please be careful. Don't do what I just did. Remove the nozzle from the glue bottle before heating it up, and just hold it in a pair of tweezers or something. It's actually a bit of a fire risk to do it the way I did it, and I shouldn't have done it that way. So I acknowledge that and I apologise for it. It was an absent-minded mistake on my part, and I just wanted to throw this in quickly to make sure that you don't do the same thing. Thanks a lot, folks. Back to the video, and just heat the tip, making sure it's pointed away from you. Sometimes it will catch light like that, and lo and behold, with a few squeezes, this will now dispense glue again. After being completely clogged, it now dispenses glue, no problem. And I keep a cigarette lighter on my desk for exactly stuff like that. You know, just give it a quick warming at the tip and it's usable again. Now, it's not super hard to keep a lighter at hand at your desk. What you do have to be careful of is obviously just make sure you're being safe while you're doing it. Pop your respirator on for a second, or just keep it away from your face. Don't go inhaling glue fumes. We all know that's not going to do us any good. So be safe while you're doing it, but by all means, if you struggle to get Tamiya thin cement, or if you indeed don't like Tamiya thin cement, then these can be fine. And I tend to buy these because I really like how accurate I can get with this applicator. The brush, the Tamiya brush that comes in the thin cement, I really like thin cement as a product in general, but the applicator brush, it can be really slow to apply glue to a larger surface, and that's not really as much of a problem with these, because these, if you give them a good hard squeeze, they will dispense a lot of glue. So yeah, these days I tend to prefer these. The Revel one, the Humbrol one, there's a million different brands. Again, the Citadel one is very overpriced, you know, buy just whatever brand of glue is reasonably priced. They're all kind of the same. But I do really appreciate being able to get the glue, for one, and for two, how much faster I can work without that applicator brush sometimes. Again, the applicator brush is a good thing, it's just not always a good thing. Swinging back to paints briefly, I want to talk about Vallejo Metal Color Airbrush Colors Dark Aluminium. I mention this paint a lot in my videos. You'll see me using it a lot in my videos. It really is an absolute banger, and I consider it an essential. You can see how battered mine is because it gets used all the time. I actually spilt a bunch of this the other day, and it caused me to have to delay a commission by a day, which upset me. Yeah, if you're ever taking the lid off of this in order to, just get the rattle ball moving again, sometimes the rattle ball will get stuck, and you'll sort of take the lid off and poke something in there just to get it unstuck. If you ever do that, just be really careful with this while the lid's off, because it's exceptionally thin. It's designed to go straight through an airbrush with no thinners needed, and it does do that. It's one of the few airbrush paints that actually goes straight through an airbrush with no help, but if you spill it, it's very thin, so it will go everywhere and create a very large, very metallic mess, and that will upset you. When we're talking tools, again, I think value for money, the basic economy makes sense when it comes to tools. So for example, I'll buy Chinese mass-produced clippers. These are honestly better quality than the new GW ones anyway. The new GW ones aren't the best, but generally the GW, the Army Painter, all that kind of thing, they are expensive. I will say for the Army Painter tools, if you buy them in the bundle, they're pretty reasonable. The cost per individual tool is kind of fine. But their clippers are just these kind of, Far Eastern mass-produced clippers, and then they've got Army Painter written on one of the arms, if I remember rightly. But like when you buy them on their own, I think they're about £8 or £9, whereas when you buy these off Amazon, they're £6.99 for two. 2 pairs of these is going to last you probably like 2 or 3 years. Like, they're really going to go a long way. So my recommendation is either like go absolutely stupid and buy an exceptionally expensive, like 70, 80 quid Gunpla set of snips that will last you for the rest of your life and you'll never have to buy them again, or just buy Far Eastern manufactured cheap 2-packs off Amazon. If you need like a full starter hobby kit, then yeah, maybe something like the Army Painter kit, or maybe even the GW kit might make sense to you, and I could totally get why you would buy it in that case. But if you're buying individual tools, then yeah, just Far Eastern mass-produced stuff. X-Acto blades, just any kind of unscrew, removable, disposable, number 7 type X-Acto blade knife. This is a blue spot one, it's pretty common. I've seen it around a million times before. I also see a lot of this one, which is again a blue spot knife. Whichever, really. Whatever's in your area, whatever's available locally. The main thing with these is just these blades. Make sure that you have a source for these blades. You can get them on Amazon, but as long as these are available to you, this is the best type of knife to use, because when these blades are new, they're exceptionally sharp. When they're dull, they're still good for things like mold line scraping. They're just a very, very usable tool, and these are even good for scraping metals. So yeah, just a great knife. A set of angled needle tweezers. These actually come from my old vape kit. I don't know where you would get this exact pair individually. I don't think you could get this exact pair individually, but I don't think it matters. These are just great for being able to hold a tiny component whilst you glue it on. for example. We all know that a lot of miniatures these days have got very fiddly little components, so being able to just grab one and just glue it on, very, very handy. But also really useful if you're spray priming something, you can actually hold the model by its base with the tweezers while spray priming it, so that you haven't got to bother putting gloves on for the sake of spray priming a single miniature. No one wants to waste a pair of gloves to spray prime one miniature. So that's another handy little tip. And then sanding sticks. These come in a variety of grits, and they are flexible, coated in sandpaper on either side, and they are very, very nice for sanding uneven surfaces. You'll need to support them a bit with your thumb and just rub them over the surface like you normally would when sanding. Like I say, there's all different grits, and the grits are color coded. And again, these come in multi-packs. Just search for flexible sanding sticks on Amazon, and you will find these in all of their flexible goodness. They're fantastic. Really, really, really useful. So brushes, I have for the longest time sworn by Rosemary & Co, and I still love a Series 33 size 3. This has been my go-to brush for many years now, and will probably continue to be my go-to brush for many years more. However, it does have stiff competition. There is a brush that I like as much as this, and it has a slightly different usage, and that is the Reaper Pro Paint Sable. This is actually a 0. It's actually the one that I prefer. They're very similar in their build and behavior, the 0 and the 1. This is a bit of an old one now, so the point is starting to get a bit tired on it. It doesn't look as crispy and pointy as it used to. I need to order a couple more of these. But Rosemary & Co or Reaper brushes are definitely my recommendations. Now, the important part is why. Why are these good brushes? And well, it's because they have a lot of body of hair, what we call a belly, so they will stay wet for longer, but they have a very fine tip. And that's why I use a size 3, because a size 3 has a fine enough tip that I can paint the eyes on a miniature with it, but it has enough belly that I can keep painting without having to reload my brush for longer, because my brush stays damp for longer. So that's what we're looking for in a miniature painting brush specifically, and that should universally be what you're looking for in a miniature painting brush. But what I also really appreciate about specifically the Rosemary size 3, this is less true of the Reaper brush because it is a bit smaller, but specifically the Rosemary size 3 is just that sweet spot of size where I can use it for basically almost every job. I very rarely need to switch it out. If I'm dry brushing or if I'm base coating like a really large area where I want an actual big brush, then maybe I'll swap it out. But other than those situations, I can pretty much always use the same brush for the entire miniature. And I love not having to switch brushes. It's so useful not having to switch brushes. So yeah, that is definitely going to be my recommendation. The Rosemary & Co. Series 33 size 3. Now, unfortunately, if you are in America, you can't get these, which is one of the reasons why I started to look at another brand and landed on these Reaper Master Series brushes, because if you're in America, you can get these. Reaper are based in Texas, and they are a very, very competent miniatures, paints, and brush manufacturing company. I actually sell a few Reaper products on my store, including these brushes. So you know I believe in them because I'm willing to risk my good name on them. So yeah, Reaper or Rosemary & Co. Can be a little harder to get Rosemary's in America because America has an import block on Sable at the moment and has for a little while now. But I do believe the Reaper Master Series Sables are obviously made, I assume, using American farmed sable, I guess. I guess. But they're great either way. Both brushes, fantastic. And that about concludes what I've got to talk about with products. A few little paint recommendations, a few little tool recommendations, a few little quality of life recommendations, and I think that's a pretty comprehensive little video. It's probably going to be a bit longer than I planned for it to be even after I edit it down. I predict it's going to be starting to push close to somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. So we'll get it wrapped up and we'll get it out there for you to enjoy. But in the meantime, Please do forget, if you enjoyed this video, or please don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. You could also consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications. Those things really, really help. And if you love the content and want to support the channel, Patreon is definitely the best way to do so. From as little as £1 a month, you can really contribute to my ability to keep making these videos. But there are lots of other things you can do too. There's affiliate links in the description and my store where I stock things like Infinity and Wild West Exodus and all sorts of cool stuff. So you could pick up some of that if you wanted to help out as well. Either way, whatever you do, whether it's as little as a like or as much as spending £1 with me, it makes no difference. I appreciate it all the same. You're all very lovely people. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I've been Downcam Stu, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.